While millions of Americans consider themselves prepared for disaster, studies suggest that over 90% of preppers would fail to survive beyond the first month of a real crisis. And it's not because they don't have enough supplies. In the next 12 minutes, I'm going to reveal the 7 critical mistakes that turn well-stocked preppers into casualties, and more importantly, show you exactly how to avoid becoming part of that statistic. By the end of this video, you'll understand why your basement full of canned goods might actually be giving you a false sense of security. Welcome to Financial Area, where we break down the real strategies for protecting your wealth, your family, and your future. If this kind of practical, no-nonsense preparedness content is valuable to you, smash that like button and subscribe for more reality checks that could save your life. Let's start with the biggest lie in the prepping community, that stockpiling equals survival. Right now, there are millions of people who believe that because they have a year's worth of canned food in their basement, they're prepared for anything. These same people have never lived off those supplies for even a single week. Here's what actually happens when disaster strikes. Most preppers fall into what I call the hoarding illusion. They spend thousands of dollars accumulating supplies, but invest almost zero time in understanding how to use them strategically. They focus 80% of their energy on acquiring stuff, and only 20% on planning how to make that stuff last. I've seen preppers with rooms full of freeze-dried meals who have no idea how much water they actually need for rehydration, or how their calorie requirements change under stress. They have medical supplies they can't identify, tools they've never used, and enough ammunition for a small army, but no understanding of how to ration it effectively. The mathematics of survival are brutal and unforgiving. Let's say you have what you think is 6 months of food stored. If you haven't calculated your actual daily caloric needs under stress, factored in the increased appetite that comes with anxiety and physical labor, or planned for the reality that stressed people eat more frequently, your 6-month supply becomes a 2-month supply overnight. But here's where it gets worse. Most preppers plan their rationing based on their current sedentary lifestyle. They calculate calories as if they'll be sitting at a desk all day instead of chopping wood, hauling water, maintaining security, and dealing with the constant physical demands of survival. A person who needs 2,000 calories a day in normal times might need 3,500 or more in a survival situation. Then there's the knowledge gap that kills. I've met preppers who own $500 water filtration systems, but have never actually used them. They have cases of MREs, but have never eaten one. They own generators, but have never run them for more than a few minutes. When crisis hits, they're not just dealing with the disaster itself. They're trying to learn how to use their own equipment while under life-threatening stress. The truth is, having supplies you don't know how to use effectively is almost worse than having no supplies at all, because it gives you false confidence that leads to poor decision-making. This brings us to the experience factor, and why most preppers are setting themselves up for failure. The prepping community loves to talk about gear and supplies, but they rarely discuss the most important element, actually living the experience they're preparing for. Weekend camping trips don't count as survival training, neither does reading survival manuals or watching YouTube videos. The only way to truly understand what you're facing is to deliberately put yourself through controlled versions of the hardship you're preparing for. Real preparation means conducting 30-day, 60-day, and 90-day tests of your actual survival plan. It means turning off your electricity, shutting off your water, and living entirely off your stored supplies while dealing with the isolation, boredom, and psychological pressure that comes with it. Most preppers have never done this because it's uncomfortable, and comfort is exactly what they're trying to preserve. But here's what you learn when you actually do this. Your carefully planned survival scenario falls apart within the first 72 hours. Your rationing plan doesn't account for stress eating. Your entertainment provisions don't prevent cabin fever. Your sanitation plan creates health hazards you never considered. Your security measures interfere with your daily routines in ways you never anticipated. The preppers who survive are the ones who have failed repeatedly in controlled conditions and learn from those failures. They understand that survival isn't about having the right stuff. It's about having the right skills and the right mindset. Speaking of skills, let's talk about the gadget trap. The survival industry wants you to believe that there's a piece of technology for every survival challenge. Need fire? Buy a fancy fire starter. Need water? Buy a high-tech filtration system. Need food? Buy freeze-dried meals that last 25 years. But technology fails. Batteries die. Moving parts break. Complex systems require maintenance you can't provide. The preppers who survive are the ones who can start a fire with wet wood and no matches, who can purify water using nothing but cloth and sunlight, who can preserve food using techniques that worked before refrigeration existed. These aren't romantic notions about returning to simpler times. These are life-saving skills that work when everything else fails. A prepper who can only start fires with a magnesium fire starter is going to die when that fire starter breaks or runs out. A prepper who can start fires using friction, solar ignition, chemical reactions, and a dozen other methods is going to live. The same principle applies to every aspect of survival. Water purification, food preparation, shelter construction, medical care. If you can only do these things with modern tools, you're not prepared for the scenarios where those tools aren't available. But even if you have the right supplies and the right skills, there's still a killer that takes down more preppers than starvation, dehydration, or violence combined: their own mind. Mental preparedness is the least discussed and most important aspect of survival. The psychological toll of constant stress, isolation, and uncertainty breaks people faster than any physical hardship. I've seen mentally tough people crack under the pressure of living in a basement for 2 weeks with their feet. Emily. I've seen confident individuals become paralyzed by decision-making when the stakes are life and death. The problem is that most preppers train their bodies and stock their shelters, but they never train their minds. They don't build tolerance for discomfort, they don't practice decision-making under pressure, and they don't develop the mental discipline required to stick to rationing plans when they're hungry and scared. Mental resilience isn't something you can buy in a store or learn from a book. It comes from deliberately putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and learning to maintain focus and discipline despite the discomfort. It comes from practicing meditation, stress management, and emotional regulation before you need them. Physical fitness is equally ignored by most preppers, and it's equally critical. The fantasy of survival is that you'll be sitting in your bunker waiting for things to get better. The reality is that survival is physically demanding work. You'll be hauling water, chopping wood, maintaining equipment, standing guard, and performing manual labor that most modern people haven't done since childhood. If you can't walk 5 miles carrying a 40-pound pack, you're not prepared for the physical demands of survival. If you can't lift, carry, and manipulate heavy objects, you're going to struggle with basic tasks like moving supplies or barricading entrances. If you don't have the cardiovascular fitness to handle stress and exertion simultaneously, you're going to make poor decisions when your life depends on good ones. Most preppers are in worse physical shape than the general population, which is already in terrible shape. They spend their time acquiring gear instead of building strength, reading about survival instead of practicing it, and planning for scenarios they're physically incapable of handling. Now let's talk about the survival killer that most preppers never even consider: sanitation. After the first week of any prolonged survival situation, waste management becomes a life or death issue. Poor sanitation leads to disease, disease leads to weakness and death, and weakness makes you vulnerable to every other threat you're facing. Most preppers have detailed plans for food, water, and security, but they have no plan for dealing with human waste, garbage disposal, or personal hygiene in a confined space with limited resource. So, they don't realize that the smell alone will compromise their operational security, or that improper waste disposal will contaminate their water sources and attract dangerous pests. In a survival situation, you're going to be generating waste every day, and you're going to be doing it in an environment where normal disposal methods aren't available. If you're sheltering in place, that waste is going to accumulate in or around your living space. If you're mobile, you're going to leave a trail that others can follow. Most preppers never make this transition because they've never practiced it. They've built consumption-based survival plans that work for weeks or months, but they haven't built production-based systems that work for years or decades. The harsh reality is that true preparedness isn't about stockpiling supplies for a temporary disruption. It's about building sustainable systems that can support you and your family indefinitely, regardless of what happens to the larger society around you. If you've made it this far, you're already ahead of 95% of people who call themselves preppers. You understand that real preparedness goes far beyond accumulating supplies. It requires skills, experience, mental toughness, physical fitness, proper planning, and operational security. But understanding isn't enough. The only way to know if you're truly prepared is to test your preparations under realistic conditions. Start with a weekend, then a week, then a month. Find the holes in your plans, fix them, and test again. Your life may depend on it. If this video has opened your eyes to the realities of survival preparedness, give it a like and subscribe to Financial Area for more content that cuts through the fantasy and gives you the hard truths you need to protect yourself and your family. And remember, the best time to start preparing was yesterday. The second best time is right now.